You already know that millions of years ago, dinosaurs ruled the Earth, but you have never seen a photo of one because cameras hadn't been invented yet. Back then, when a species vanished, it left behind nothing but silence and bones. We had to rely on crude sketches, faded paintings, or our own imagination to guess what they looked like. But in the 19th century, human technology changed everything. The invention of the camera gave us the power to freeze time. For the first time in history, we could look into the eyes of a creature that no longer exists. But this power is a double-edged sword. It means that today, we are forced to witness the exact moment of their destruction. In this video, I am going to show you the last photos ever taken of 33 extinct animals. These are not just photographs. They are the final, haunting evidence of unique lives that have been erased from existence forever. Number 33. The passenger pigeon. Imagine looking up at the sky and seeing it go dark in the middle of the day. Not because of storm clouds, but because of birds. This sounds like a fantasy, but in 19th century North America, it was a reality. The passenger pigeon was once the most abundant bird on the planet. Flocks were so massive that they stretched for miles and took hours to pass overhead, blocking out the sun like a living eclipse. A single flock could contain over 1 billion birds, and the sound of their wings was described as a deafening roar that shook the ground. They were the biological storm of the American forests, shaping the ecosystem just by landing on trees, often breaking branches with their sheer combined weight. But this abundance became their curse. Because they traveled in such dense clouds, they were the easiest targets in the world. When European settlers arrived, they saw these birds not as living creatures, but as an endless supply of cheap meat. Therefore, the slaughter began on an industrial scale. Hunters did not just shoot them. They used nets, fire, and even dynamite to kill them by the thousands. They disrupted their nesting grounds, cutting down the forests where the pigeons lived to build cities and farms. The destruction was so ruthless and efficient that in less than 50 years, a population of billions was reduced to 0.by 1914. Only one passenger pigeon was left in the entire world. Her name was Martha. She lived out her final days in a small cage at the Cincinnati Zoo, thousands of miles away from the skies her ancestors once owned. The photo you see on screen right now captures Martha in her final years. She looks small, ragged, and incredibly lonely. On September 1st, 1914, Martha died on the floor of her cage. Her death marked the first time in history that humanity watched a species go from billions to none in a single human lifetime. Martha's body was frozen in a block of ice and sent to the Smithsonian, where she remains today, a silent, feathered warning that no species is too common to be wiped out. Number 32. The Caribbean monk seal. The creature you are looking at now was the only seal species ever native to the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. This is the Caribbean monk seal. For thousands of years, they lounged on the warm, sandy beaches of the West Indies, from the Florida Keys to the coast of Mexico. They were social, docile animals that gathered in groups of up to 100, moving sluggishly on land but swimming with grace in the clear tropical waters. They had no natural predators on the islands. Therefore, they never evolved a fear of land animals. When humans approached them, they didn't run away. Instead, they watched with curiosity. That curiosity was their fatal mistake. When European explorers and sailors arrived in the Caribbean, they found the seals to be incredibly easy targets. They hunted them relentlessly for their blubber, which could be processed into oil for lamps and machinery. The slaughter was brutal and uncontrolled. Sailors would kill hundreds in a single night, leaving the beaches empty. As the centuries passed, their food sources also began to vanish because humans were overfishing the reefs. Therefore, the seals were starving and hunted at the same time. By the early 20th century, the Caribbean monk seal was already a ghost. In 1952, a scientific expedition spotted a small group of them on Serenilla Bank, a remote reef between Jamaica and Nicaragua. The photo you are seeing on screen is one of the very last images ever taken of this species alive. It shows a creature that looks calm, unaware that it is one of the last of its kind. After that expedition, no one ever saw them again. The US government officially declared them extinct in 2008 after a 5-year search found absolutely nothing. Today, they exist only in grainy black and white photos and a few preserved museum specimens. The lost monks of the Caribbean. Number 31. The golden toad. This might look like a small, bright toy, but you are looking at a creature that became the poster child for the amphibian apocalypse. This is the golden toad. These stunning animals were famous for their brilliant, neon orange skin that looked like it was glowing. They lived in only one place on Earth, a tiny, 4-square-kilometer patch of high-altitude cloud forest in Monteverde, Costa Rica. For decades, they were a local legend. Every year during the rainy season, thousands of them would emerge from the ground to mate, turning the forest floor into a vibrant carpet of gold dye. In 1987, scientists visited the reserve and counted over 1,500 toads in the breeding pools. It was a healthy, thriving population. But just 1 year later, in 1988, they found only 10. The collapse was sudden and terrifying. By 1989, only a single male was found. He was the last golden toad ever seen. The photo you see on screen right now captures one of those final, vibrant males before the silence took over. So, what happened? The leading theory is a double punch of climate change and disease. A severe drought struck the cloud forest, drying up the pools the toads needed to lay their eggs. At the same time, a deadly skin disease called chytrid fungus was spreading through the mountains, suffocating amphibians by thickening their skin. Therefore, the golden toad had nowhere to run. They didn't decline slowly. They simply vanished. In 2004, they were officially declared extinct. This photo serves as a terrifying reminder of how fragile life can be. 1 year, a forest full of gold. The next, nothing but leaves. Number 30, the Carolina Parakeet. This bird looks like it belongs in the Amazon rainforest, but it was actually the only parrot native to the United States. This is the Carolina Parakeet. With its vibrant yellow head and green body, it was a splash of tropical color in the deciduous forests of the East Coast. These birds were highly social and incredibly noisy, traveling in flocks that could be heard from miles away. They had a unique defense mechanism. They ate the seeds of the cocklebur plant, which were poisonous to other animals. Therefore, the parakeets themselves became toxic, and any predator that ate one would likely die, but poison could not protect them from fashion. In the late 19th century, colorful feathers became a massive trend for women's hats. Therefore, hunters slaughtered these birds by the thousands to supply the millinery trade. Farmers also shot them because they raided orchards, treating them as pests rather than unique wildlife. The population crashed with terrifying speed. By the early 1900s, the wild flocks were gone. The last known individual was a male named Incas, who lived in the Cincinnati Zoo. The photo you see on screen is one of the only clear images of him. In a tragic twist of fate, Incas died in 1918 in the exact same cage where Martha the passenger pigeon had died 4 years earlier. With his death, the vibrant colors of the North American forests faded into gray forever. Number 29. The Quagga. At first glance, the animal in this photo looks like a bad taxidermy experiment, a creature that is half zebra, half horse. But this was the quagga. It was a unique subspecies of the plain zebra that lived in the dry grasslands of South Africa. Unlike its cousins, the quagga had stripes only on its head and neck, which faded into a solid brown coat on its back. For thousands of years, huge herds of them grazed the Karoo, surviving in a harsh, arid landscape. But when Dutch and British settlers arrived in the 19th century, they saw the quagga as nothing more than a competitor for their sheep and goats. Therefore, they launched a campaign of extermination. They hunted them for meat and hides, or simply shot them to clear the land for livestock. The settlers believed the herds were endless, so they never stopped shooting. By 1878, the quagga was extinct in the wild. The entire species was reduced to one lonely female living in the Amsterdam Zoo. The photo you are seeing right now was taken in 1883. It captures her standing in her enclosure, waiting for a herd that no longer existed. When she died later that year, the zookeepers didn't even realize she was the last one. The world only realized the quagga was extinct years after it was already gone. Number 28, the Barbary Lion. The lion you see in this grainy image is not just any big cat. It is a king that has been dethroned. This is the Barbary Lion, the legendary predator of the Atlas Mountains in North Africa. These lions were physically distinct from the African lions we know today. They had massive, dark manes that covered nearly half their bodies, protecting them from the cold mountain air. They were the beasts of legend, the lions that fought gladiators in the Roman Colosseum and inspired the myths of ancient Egypt. But their impressive appearance made them the ultimate target. In the 19th and 20th centuries, European colonists and trophy hunters flocked to North Africa with modern rifles. Killing a Barbary lion was seen as a symbol of supreme bravery and status. Therefore, they were hunted without mercy. By the 1920s, the population had been shattered. The photo you see on screen is widely considered the last verified image of a wild Barbary lion. It was taken in 1942 by a French photographer named Marcelin Flandrin from a plane, flying over the Atlas Mountains. Shortly after this photo was taken, the last wild roar was silenced. However, some scientists believe that the bloodline of this ancient king might still exist, hidden in the DNA of captive zoo lions around the world. Number 27. The Zanzibar Leopard. The animal in this photo looks like a ghost fading into the background, and that is exactly what happened to it. This is the Zanzibar Leopard, a unique subspecies that lived only on the island of Zanzibar in Tanzania. It was smaller than its mainland cousins, with a pale coat patterned by small spots that helped it vanish into the island's dry scrubland. For centuries, it was a mysterious, elusive hunter that kept to the shadows. But in the 1960s, a wave of hysteria swept across the island. The local government branded these leopards as dangerous pests and evil spirits sent to harm villagers. Therefore, they launched a brutal extermination campaign. Fear spread, and bullets followed. Hunters tracked them down relentlessly, wiping out the entire population in just a few decades. By the 1990s, the forests were silent. The photo you see on screen is one of the few confirmed images left of this beautiful cat before it was erased. In a strange twist, a video surfaced in 2003 claiming to show a survivor, but scientists have never been able to confirm it. Therefore, the Zanzibar leopard officially remains a memory. Lost to human fear. Number 26. The Baiji Dolphin. The creature in this image looks like it is smiling, but its story is one of the saddest in aquatic history. This is the Baiji, also known as the goddess of the Yangtze. For 20 million years, this unique white dolphin lived only in China's longest river, using highly developed sonar to navigate the muddy waters. They were a relic of ancient evolution, surviving ice ages and changing continents. But they could not survive the 20th century. As China industrialized, the Yangtze River was transformed into a busy highway of noise and pollution. Heavy boat traffic confused the dolphin's sonar, causing them to collide with propellers, while illegal fishing nets trapped and drowned them. The construction of massive dams destroyed their habitat, cutting off their migration routes. Therefore, their numbers collapsed from thousands to just a handful. Scientists tried to save them by capturing a male named Chi, who lived in captivity for 22 years. When he died in 2002, hope died with him. In 2006, a massive scientific expedition searched the river for weeks but found absolutely nothing. The Baiji was declared functionally extinct, marking the first time in history that humans completely wiped out a species of dolphin. Number 25. The Gastric-Brooding Frog. This might look like an ordinary frog, but you are looking at a biological miracle that we will likely never see again. This is the Gastric-Brooding Frog, native to the rainforests of eastern Australia. Discovered in the 1970s, this frog had a reproductive strategy unlike any other creature on Earth. Instead of laying eggs in water, the mother swallowed her fertilized eggs whole. Inside her stomach, digestion stopped completely, and her belly became a living nursery. Weeks later, she would birth fully formed froglets out of her mouth. Tea was a scientific sensation. But almost as soon as we found them, we lost them. A deadly pathogen known as chytrid fungus swept through their habitat, thickening their skin and suffocating them. Combined with deforestation, the population crashed with terrifying speed. By 1981, just a decade after being discovered, they were gone. The photo on screen is one of the only records of this incredible mother. Today, scientists are attempting a Lazarus project to clone them back to life. But for now, the only place this miracle exists is in history books. Number 24. Schomburgk's deer. If you are from Thailand, you might recognize the shape of this animal's antlers, but you have never seen one alive. This is Schomburgk's deer. It was once the pride of the swampy plains of central Thailand. This deer was famous for its magnificent, basket-shaped antlers that looked like a crown of branches, making it one of the most regal creatures in Asia. For centuries, they lived peacefully in the tall grass, avoiding tigers and leopards, but they could not avoid the expansion of Bangkok. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, humans converted their grassland homes into rice paddies and cities. At the same time, hunters relentlessly targeted them for their antlers, which were prized as trophies and used in traditional medicine. Therefore, the deer had nowhere to run. They were squeezed out of existence by civilization. By 1938, the entire species was reduced to a single male living as a pet in a temple in Samut Sakhon province. The grainy photo you see on screen is the only evidence left of this species in captivity. When that final deer died, Schomburgk's deer vanished forever. leaving behind only mounted heads on walls as a reminder of what we destroyed. Number 23. The Pyrenean Ibex. The animal in this photo looks like it belongs in a fantasy novel. This is the Pyrenean Ibex, locally known as the Bucado. For millennia, this magnificent mountain goat ruled the jagged cliffs that divide France from Spain. They were the ghosts of the Pyrenees, famous for their immense, lyre-shaped horns and their supernatural ability to cling to vertical rock faces. They were survivors, adapted to withstand the harshest winters in Europe. But while they could escape wolves and bears, they could not escape trophy hunters. In the 19th century, their massive horns became a symbol of status for wealthy Europeans. Therefore, hunters flocked to the mountains to claim them. The slaughter was uncontrolled. By 1900, the French population was wiped out, leaving only a tiny, terrified group in Spain. By 1999, the entire ancient lineage had been reduced to a single female named Celia. The photo you are looking at right now captures Celia wandering the cliffs alone, carrying the entire genetic legacy of her subspecies on her shoulders. On January 6, 2000, a tree fell on Celia during a storm, crushing her and ending the species. However, there is a twist. In 2003, scientists briefly cloned her, making the Pyrenean Ibex the only creature in history to go extinct twice. Number 22. The Pinta Island tortoise that if you look at the screen now, you will see a face that became the global symbol for loneliness. This is Lonesome George. He was a Pinta Island tortoise, a giant of the Galapagos capable of living for over 100 years. In their prime, thousands of them covered Pinta Island, moving slowly through the volcanic landscape like living boulders. But their ability to survive for months without food became their cursed eye in the 19th century. Whalers and pirates discovered that these tortoises were the perfect fresh food source for long voyages. They could be stacked alive in the holds of ships by the hundreds. Therefore, sailors stripped the island bare, taking thousands of tortoises and leaving behind invasive goats that destroyed the vegetation. By the 20th century, the island was empty. George was discovered in 1971, the last survivor of a murdered world. He spent the next 40 years at a research station, surrounded by scientists who were desperate to find him a mate, but it never happened. The photo you see on screen shows George in his final years, looking tired and ancient. When he died in 2012, his subspecies vanished forever, leaving us with nothing but guilt. Number 21. The Heath Hen. If you look at the screen right now, you will see a bird standing alone in a field, puffing out its chest. This is Booming Ben. He was the very last Heath Hen on Earth. These birds were once so common in New England that servants petitioned their masters not to feed them Heath Hen more than 3 times a week. They were the original Thanksgiving bird, abundant and cheap, but their popularity was their downfall. They were hunted by the wagon load for food, and their grassland homes were turned into towns. By the 1870s, they had vanished from the mainland, surviving only on the island of Martha's Vineyard. Locals tried desperately to save them, creating a sanctuary. But nature turned against them. A wildfire destroyed their breeding grounds, and a harsh winter killed the survivors. Therefore, the population plummeted. By 1929, only one male remained. They named him Booming Ben. For 3 springs, Ben returned to the traditional mating ground. He inflated his orange air sacs and made his booming call, waiting for a female to answer. But there were no females left. The photo you see captures Ben in his final years, performing a mating dance for a species that was already dead. He disappeared in 1932, and with him, the Heath Hen was gone forever. Number 20. The Bubal Hartebeest. The animal in this photo looks like a creature from ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, and that is because it was. This is the Bubal Hartebeest. It was a magnificent antelope that roamed the deserts of North Africa, from Morocco to Egypt. It was famous for its lyre-shaped horns, which were so distinct that the ancient Egyptians kept them as sacred animals in their temples. For centuries, they were the masters of the dry, rocky landscape, but in the 20th century, the arrival of European firearms turned their open habitat into a shooting gallery. French military patrols in Algeria and Tunisia hunted them for meat and target practice. Unlike other antelopes that scatter when threatened, the Bubal Hartebeest had a fatal flaw. When one was shot, the others would often stand still to defend the fallen member. Therefore, entire herds could be wiped out in minutes. By the 1920s, they were extinct in the wild. The last known individual was a female that lived in the Paris Zoo. The photo you are seeing right now was taken in 1923. It shows her standing on concrete. Thousands of miles from the desert sand she was built for. When she died later that year, a lineage that had survived since the time of the pharaohs turned to dust. Number 19. The Tul Lake Wallaby. This image shows a small, graceful creature that looks like a kangaroo but stands just under a meter tall. This is the Tul Lake Wallaby, also known as the Gray's Wallaby. It once leapt across the grasslands of southeastern Australia, famous for its sleek fur and elegant speed. They were first described by Europeans in 1846, but their beauty made them a target as British settlers expanded their farms. They cleared the native bush that the wallabies used for cover. At the same time, they introduced foxes and hunted the wallabies for their soft pelts. Therefore, the wallabies were caught in a pincer movement of destruction. Their numbers crashed with terrifying speed. By the 1920s, scientists realized they were vanishing and tried to launch a rescue mission. They captured 14 wallabies to start a breeding program, but tragedy struck. Most of them died from the stress of capture. Only 4 survived to reach the zoo. The photo you see on screen is of the very last female in captivity. She looks calm, but she is the end of the line. She died in 1924, and while rumors of sightings in the wild persisted for decades, none were ever confirmed. Today, this grainy black and white photo is the only window we have left into her world. Number 18. The Guam Flying Fox. The animal you see here is not a bird, but a bat with a wingspan of nearly 3 feet. This is the Guam Flying Fox. For thousands of years, these fruit bats thrived on the tiny Pacific island of Guam. They were essential to the jungle, pollinating plants and spreading seeds. They lived in noisy colonies, hanging from the trees like dark fruit. But their island paradise was about to be invaded. After World War II, military traffic to Guam increased, and with it came a silent assassin, the brown tree snake. This snake was accidentally introduced to the island, and it had no natural enemies. Therefore, it multiplied uncontrollably. The snake slithered into the trees at night and devoured the bats while they slept. At the same time, humans hunted the bats for food, considering them a delicacy. Caught between hungry snakes and hungry humans, the Guam Flying Fox was doomed. By the 1960s, the population had collapsed. The photo you are seeing right now is one of the last images of this species in the wild. The last confirmed sighting was in 1968, when the last bat fell. The forests of Guam grew silent, and without them to spread seeds. Many native trees began to die out as well. Number 17. The Japanese sea lion. If you look at the screen, you will see a group of sea lions resting on a rocky shore. But these are not the sea lions you see at the zoo today. This is the Japanese sea lion. They were once a common sight along the coasts of Japan and the Korean peninsula. They were slightly larger than their California cousins and were known for their dark, grayish-black fur. For centuries, they were respected by fishermen as symbols of the ocean's bounty. But in the early 20th century, respect turned to greed. Commercial fishermen began to hunt them on an industrial scale for their skins and oil. They also targeted them because they believed the sea lions were eating too many fish. Therefore, a war was declared on the species. They were shot on beaches, in caves, and in the open water. During World War II, their habitat was further destroyed by naval battles and military testing. By the 1950s, reports of sightings became rare. The photo you see on screen is one of the very last verified images of a colony. The last confirmed sighting was in 1974, when a juvenile was captured off the coast of Rebun Island. Since then, despite intense searches, the Japanese sea lion has never been seen again, a victim of overfishing and war. Number 16. The Crescent Nail-tail Wallaby. This small, rabbit-sized creature is the Crescent Nail-tail Wallaby. It was once found throughout the woodlands of Central and Western Australia. It got its name from a strange, spur-like nail at the end of its tail and a white crescent shape on its side. It was a shy, nocturnal animal that spent its days sleeping in hollow logs or under bushes. But like many Australian marsupials, it stood no chance against the invaders brought by European settlers. The introduction of the red fox was a catastrophe. Foxes were efficient killers that hunted the slow-moving wallabies with ease. At the same time, sheep and cattle ate the grass and shrubs the wallabies needed for cover. Therefore, they were left exposed and vulnerable. The species crashed so quickly that scientists barely had time to study them. The photo you see on screen is a rare glimpse of a survivor in the early 20th century. By 1956, the Crescent Nail-tail Wallaby was declared extinct. Today, all that remains are a few museum specimens and the stories of the Aboriginal elders who remember hunting them long ago. Number 15. The Spix's Macaw. The blue bird you see on screen became famous worldwide as the star of the movie Rio. But the real story is much darker than the film. This is the Spix's macaw, also known as the little blue macaw. It was native to a very specific part of Brazil, living in the gallery forests along the São Francisco River. They were known for their elegant, grey-blue feathers and their strong, monogamous bonds. They mated for life, but their beauty was their curse. Because they were so rare and beautiful, collectors paid thousands of dollars to own one. Therefore, trappers climbed trees to steal chicks from nests, and hunters shot the adults. At the same time, the unique Carebe trees they nested in were cut down for firewood and farming. By the 1980s, the wild population had collapsed. In 1990, researchers found only one male left in the wild. He lived alone for a decade, desperately trying to mate with a female of a different species because there were none of his own kind left. The photo you see on screen is one of the last confirmed images of this lonely male flying free. He disappeared in late 2000, and with him, the species was declared extinct in the wild. Today, about 100 survive in captivity, waiting for a forest that might never be safe enough for them to return to. Number 14. The Alaotra Grebe. The small, rusty-colored bird in this photo looks unremarkable, but it holds a tragic title. It was the last bird to go extinct in the 2010s. This is the Alaotra Grebe, a water bird that lived exclusively on Lake Alaotra in Madagascar. It had tiny wings and could barely fly. Therefore, it spent its entire life on the water, diving for fish. But the lake ecosystem was destroyed by human interference. Farmers burned the papyrus reeds where the birds nested to create rice fields. Fishermen introduced carnivorous fish like the snakehead mull, which ate the grebe's chicks. And worst of all, nylon gill nets were strung across the lake, trapping and drowning the diving birds. They were assaulted from every angle. The last confirmed sighting was in 1985. The photo you are looking at is one of the only clear images ever taken of a living pair. Scientists searched for decades, hoping they were just hiding in the reeds, but in 2010, the species was officially declared extinct. It was a quiet exit for a bird that never had a chance. Number 13, the Formosan clouded leopard. The cat you see in this photo was a legend in Taiwan. This is the Formosan clouded leopard, a subspecies unique to the island. The indigenous Rukai people considered it a sacred spirit that guided their ancestors to their homeland. It was the top predator of the forest, an agile climber with cloud-like spots that allowed it to disappear into the dappled sunlight of the trees. But the spirit of the forest could not survive the chainsaw. Massive logging operations in the 20th century destroyed their habitat, while hunters pursued them for their beautiful pelts, which were sold as luxury rugs. The last confirmed sighting was in 1983. The photo on screen is one of the few visual records we have of this majestic animal. In the early 2000s, a team of zoologists set up 13,000 camera traps across the mountains of Taiwan, hoping to catch a glimpse of a survivor. They waited for 4 years. They captured thousands of photos of other animals, but not a single leopard. In 2013, it was declared extinct, leaving a hole in the heart of Taiwan's wilderness. Number 12, the western black rhinoceros. The animal in this photo looks like a tank made of flesh and bone. This is the western black rhino. It was once abundant across the savannas of Central and West Africa. They were distinguished by a long, pointed upper lip used for grasping leaves and twigs. For millions of years, they were the architects of the landscape, shaping the bush simply by eating it. But in the 20th century, a wave of poaching swept across Africa. Their horns were falsely believed to cure fevers and even cancer in traditional medicine. Therefore, they were worth more than gold. Poachers armed with military-grade weapons hunted them relentlessly. Conservationists tried to protect them, but the demand was too high and the protection too weak. By 2001, only 5 individuals were left in northern Cameroon. The photo you see on screen captures one of these final survivors, standing in the dry grass, unaware that he is the end of an evolutionary line. In 2011, after extensive aerial surveys failed to find a single animal, the western black rhino was declared extinct. It was not a natural end. It was a robbery. Number 11, the Yangtze giant softshell turtle. The creature in this image looks like a rock that learned to swim. This is the Yangtze giant softshell turtle, the largest freshwater turtle in the world. They were ancient giants, weighing over 200 kilograms and living for more than a century. In Vietnam, a related individual was worshipped as the golden turtle god of Hoan Kiem Lake, believed to hold the spirit of the nation. But gods do not fare well against pollution. In China and Vietnam, Their river habitats were turned into toxic sewers by industrial waste, and they were hunted for their meat and shells. By 2019, the fate of the entire species rested on one female named Xiangxiang. She lived in the Suzhou Zoo in China, along with an elderly male. She was the last female on Earth. Scientists were desperate to save the species. Therefore, they tried artificial insemination. The procedure seemed to go well, but Xiangxiang never woke up. She died the next day. The photo you see here captures her swimming in her enclosure, her massive shell visible just below the surface. With her death, the species became functionally extinct. The remaining males are just ghosts waiting to fade away. Number 10, the Christmas Island Pipistrelle. The tiny bat in this photo looks fragile, and it was. This is the Christmas Island Pipistrelle. It was a microbat that lived only on Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean. They were insect-eating machines, keeping the island's ecosystem in balance. As recently as the 1980s, they were common, flitting through the dusk in the thousands, but then they started to disappear. No one knows exactly why. Perhaps it was invasive ants, giant centipedes, or an unknown disease. By 2009, scientists realized the situation was critical. They set up specialized bat detectors across the island to find the last survivors. They found only one. It was a female. They tried to capture her to start a captive breeding program, but she evaded their nets. The photo you see on screen is a thermal image, one of the last times she was ever seen flying. On August 26, 2009, her echolocation calls went silent. Scientists waited for her to return to her roost, but she never did. The Christmas Island Pipistrelle became the first mammal extinction in Australia in 50 years, vanishing while we were listening. Number 9. The laughing owl. If you look at the screen, you will see a bird with a piercing stare. This is the laughing owl, native to New Zealand. It got its name from its terrifying call, which sounded exactly like a madman laughing in the dark. For centuries, this sound echoed through the forests, scaring early European settlers who thought the woods were haunted. They were ground feeders, hunting rats, and lizards on the forest floor. But being on the ground made them vulnerable. When settlers introduced stoats, cats, and rats to New Zealand, the laughing owl didn't stand a chance. Their eggs were eaten, and the adults were ambushed. By the early 20th century, the laughter had turned into silence. The photo you see on screen was taken in the early 1900s. It shows one of the last living individuals in captivity, tethered to a perch. The last confirmed sighting was in 1914. Since then, despite many unconfirmed reports, the forests have remained quiet. The mad laughter is gone, replaced by the wind. Number 8, the Dusky Seaside Sparrow. The bird you see here looks like a common sparrow, but he was the loneliest bird in America. This is Orange-banded, the very last of his kind. They lived exclusively in the salt marshes of Merritt Island, Florida, right next to what is now the Kennedy Space Center. But to build rockets and control mosquitoes, humans drained the marshes and flooded others with pesticides. Therefore, their homes turned into death traps. By 1979, only 6 sparrows were left. Cruelly, every single one of them was male. There were no females left on Earth to save the species. The photo on screen captures Orange-banded in a glass cage at Disney World, where he lived out his final days. He died on June 17, 1987. With his death, the Dusky Seaside Sparrow was declared extinct, a victim of the March of Progress. Number 7. The Kauai O'o. If you look at the screen, you will see a small bird perched on a branch in Hawaii. This is the Kauai O'o. It was a honeyeater with a beautiful, bell-like song that echoed through the rainforests for millions of years. But the arrival of mosquitoes carrying avian malaria, along with invasive rats, decimated them. By the 1980s, only one pair was left. But tragedy struck when a hurricane swept through the island and killed the female. Therefore, the male was left completely alone. The image you see is taken from the last footage ever recorded of him. He continued to sing his mating call for years, pausing to listen for a response that would never come. He was last seen in 1987. When he died, the voice of the Kauai O'o vanished from the earth forever. Number 6, the Bramble Cay Melomys. The small rodent in this photo holds a terrifying record. It is widely considered the first mammal to go extinct directly because of man-made climate change. They lived on a tiny coral key in the Great Barrier Reef, measuring only 340 by 150 meters. For centuries, they thrived on this isolated patch of sand. But as global temperatures rose, sea levels began to climb. Storm surges and high tides swept over the low-lying island, drowning their vegetation and flooding their burrows. Therefore, they had nowhere to hide. The photo you see on screen is one of the few images we have of them scavenging on the beach. In 2009, scientists visited the island and found nothing but empty sand. They were officially declared extinct in 2016, washed away by the rising tide. Number 5, the Jovan tiger. The tiger in this grainy photo is a ghost of the Indonesian jungle. This is the Jovan tiger. They were once the kings of the island of Java, slightly smaller than their mainland cousins but just as fierce. But as the human population on Java exploded, the forests were cut down to make room for rice paddies and villages. The tigers were hunted as pests and killed for their skins. By the 1970s, they had been pushed into the most remote mountains. The photo you are seeing right now is one of the last confirmed images of a Jovan tiger in the wild, taken in 1938. After this, sightings became rare rumors. The last confirmed sighting was in 1976. Since then, despite numerous expeditions, no hard proof has been found. The Jovan tiger is now considered extinct, leaving the forest without its king. Number 4, the ivory-billed woodpecker. The bird in this grainy black and white photo is the ghost of the American South. This is the ivory-billed woodpecker, also known as the Lord God bird, because that is what people shouted when they saw its massive wingspan and striking white beak. It was the largest woodpecker in the United States, a creature that required vast stretches of ancient, untouched swamp forest to survive. They were the royalty of the tree canopy, but in the early 20th century, the logging industry moved into the southern swamps. They saw the ancient cypress trees not as a habitat, but as timber for homes and furniture. Therefore, the forests were clear-cut at a terrifying rate. As the trees fell, the woodpeckers lost their food and their homes. By the 1930s, they were restricted to a single tract of forest in Louisiana called the Singer Tract. A scientist named Arthur Allen managed to record their unique Kent calls and snapped the photo you see on screen in 1935. It is one of the only clear proofs we have that they existed. Despite pleas to save the forest, the Singer Tract was logged to the ground during World War II to make crates for tea. The last confirmed sighting was in 1944. Since then, millions of dollars have been spent searching for them, but the Lord God bird has never answered back. Number 3, the Rabb's fringe-limbed tree frog. This might look like just another frog, but you are looking at a creature that became a celebrity for the saddest reason possible. This is the Rabb's fringe-limbed tree frog. It was a marvel of evolution, living high in the canopy of central Panama. It had massive webbed feet that allowed it to glide through the air like a flying squirrel, leaping from tree to tree in the cloud forests. But in 2005, a silent, invisible killer arrived. A deadly disease called chytrid fungus swept through the rainforest like a wildfire. It thickened the skin of amphibians, blocking their ability to breathe and drink. Therefore, the frogs began to die in the thousands. Scientists raced to Panama on a rescue mission, but for the Rabb's frog, they were almost too late. They only managed to rescue a handful of individuals before the wild population was completely wiped out. Eventually, only one remained, a male named Tuffy. The image on screen shows Tuffy in his final years, resting his chin on his limbs inside a glass terrarium at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. He sat in silence because there was nobody left on the entire planet to hear his mating call. On September 26, 2016, Tuffy passed away, and his species died with him. Number 2, the northern white rhino. What you are about to see is not just a photograph. It is a portrait of the end of the world for an entire subspecies. This ancient giant is Sudan. He was the last male northern white rhino on Earth. For millions of years, his ancestors thundered across the grasslands of Central Africa, from Chad to the Congo. They were unstoppable tanks of nature, with skin-like armor and horns that could pierce a lion. They were the architects of the ecosystem, shaping the landscape just by walking through it. But in the 20th century, a wave of greed swept across the continent. Poachers, armed with automatic weapons and GPS trackers, hunted them relentlessly for their horns. These horns are made of nothing but keratin, the same stuff as your fingernails, but on the black market, they were sold for more than gold. Therefore, the population collapsed. In the 1960s, there were over 2,000 of them. By the early 2000s, there were only a handful left in the wild. Sudan spent his final years at the Ol Pejeta Conservancy in Kenya, living under 24-hour armed guard. The photo you see on screen right now was taken by photographer Amy Vital. It captures Sudan in his final moments on March 19, 2018. He was 45 years old, his body failing, his muscles too weak to stand. In the image, his devoted caretaker leans in to comfort him, resting his hand on the rhino's rough skin. When Sudan closed his eyes for the last time, the hope for a natural recovery of the northern white rhino died with him. Number 1. The thylacine. If you look at the screen right now, you will see the most famous last photo in history. This creature looks like a wolf, but it has stripes like a tiger and a pouch like a kangaroo. This is the thylacine, also known as the Tasmanian tiger. For thousands of years, this apex predator roamed the forests of Australia and Tasmania. It was a shy, nocturnal hunter that posed very little threat to humans. But when European settlers arrived with their sheep farms, they needed a villain to blame for their livestock losses. Therefore, the thylacine was framed. The government branded them as bloodthirsty killers and put a price on their heads. They paid £1 for every dead adult. The slaughter was industrialized. Men marched into the forests with guns and snares, wiping them out systematically. By the 1930s, the wild thylacine was gone. The entire species had been reduced to a single animal living in a concrete cage at the Hobart Zoo. His name was Benjamin. The footage you are seeing right now was filmed in 1933. It is the last moving image of a species that had survived for millions of years. But the true tragedy happened 3 years later. On the night of September 7, 1936, the zookeepers made a careless mistake. They locked Benjamin out of his sleeping shelter. That night, the temperature dropped freezing cold. Therefore, the last thylacine on Earth died of exposure, shivering on the cold concrete while waiting for a door that would never open. Conclusion: these 33 photos are difficult to look at. They are uncomfortable. But that is exactly why they matter. Before the camera was invented, extinction was an abstract concept. It was just bones in the ground. But today, because of these images, extinction has a face. We can see the fear in their eyes. We can see the loneliness of the last survivor. These animals did not die because of asteroids or ice ages. They died because of choices. Choices to cut down a forest, to hunt for a trophy, or to simply look the other way. But there is a silver lining. The fact that you are watching this video right now means that you care. Awareness is the first step to prevention. There are thousands of species on the brink right now. The vaquita porpoise, the Jovan rhino, the Amur leopard. They are still here. Their photos do not have to be the last ones. If this series moved you, please do me a favor. Do not just scroll to the next video. Take a second to hit the like button and share this story. The more people who see the faces of what we lost, the harder they will fight for what we still have. And tell me in the comments below, which of these last photos haunts you the most? Was it the loneliness of Lonesome George, or the final pacing of Benjamin? I read every single comment. Thank you for watching, and for remembering them.